All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, for joining Mama's Making Millions. We get to talk about how to run profitable businesses while raising a happy family. With me today is one of our speakers who is an author and also a podcaster. He is an educator and a personal development mentor whose ideals, including self-inquiry, challenge, and analysis. He writes and teaches to assist others in undoing faulty narratives about their identities and how life works so that they may begin to make more meaningful choices and resolve their deepest burdens. Mr. Gregory Deal spent many years studying cultures around the world and now lives a quiet life in a rural village of Armenia with his cats, books, and music. So without further ado, please help me welcome Gregory Deal to the show today. Hi, Gregory. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm good. I'm one of those cats you mentioned might interrupt us at some point, but we can just carry on. It's fine.
Absolutely. That's life, right? Like
Mhm.
we get to incorporate and integrate everything into it. So yeah, let's start with, I'm really curious. I know we have talked before, but I want the audience to have the chance to get to know you as well. So can you please share with us who you are and what really ultimately inspired you to do what you
That's a long story, and
do?
I started writing books about 5 or 6 years ago. The first book was called Brand Identity Breakthrough, and many of the books I've written since then have been about things like personal development, travel, because I've been traveling around the world since I was about 18 years old. And it's funny, my latest book, Everyone is an Entrepreneur, Selling Economic Self-Determination in a Post-Soviet World, is kind of the culmination of many things I've written about before, because it's partially travel. It's about the experiences I've had living in Eastern Europe and the post-Soviet, post-communist part of the world. It's part personal development, trying to help people learn to think like entrepreneurs and take control of their own lives. And it's part business, explaining the mechanics of what an entrepreneur is, the rules that govern business and entrepreneurship. And so it really is like coming together all the things that I care most about. And it's even appropriate, especially appropriate, perhaps even for Western audiences like America, where I come from, to try to understand how people in different parts of the world view these universal principles, how they apply or fail to apply them in their lives, especially in a place like where I live now in Armenia, where for generations, people have been so conditioned away from the concept of business, of entrepreneurship, of making their own decisions instead of the government making decisions for them. And so I wrote it with the intention of helping Westerners appreciate the freedoms they have and use them as much as they possibly can, which is what you're all about.
Yes. Mhm. Amazing. So if you have to share with us, right, like one tip, one practical strategy to really take on so that we can utilize, the freedom that we have and go after it, like what would be the first step to take when it comes to being a entrepreneur?
The first step to take is freeing your mind. It's learning to look at familiar concepts, familiar processes with new eyes, because the goal of the entrepreneur is to find a better way to do something, whatever it ends up being, right? You can either do something new or you can do something old, but in a new way, right? And you can't really do that unless you're willing to question the way that things are done. And the way things are done is a consequence of the way that people think about how things work. So in order to improve the way things are done, you first have to be willing to question the way you and most other people think about those things. And that's really the primordial step to improving or innovating in any way whatsoever. And that's often the step that a lot of people are uncomfortable doing, because they just want to focus on a process. Usually they want a business model given to them. They want a motivational speech about just getting started on something. But I really focus on the internal work of adopting the paradigm of an entrepreneurial thinker, the mindset of somebody who does not accept limitations as they are presented, or who is not content just doing things the way other people are doing them, and who will question, maybe there's a better way to live, maybe there's a better way to make money, maybe there's a better way to produce this product or service that I'm particularly interested in producing.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is the first step to entrepreneurship is being able to see not everything on face value, but beyond its value. And what is a better way, or is the way that we understand of something's working at the moment being the only way, right? It's like
Yeah.
being open to what's truly possible. I talk about this with, of course, my clients all the time. What I really love, and one of the honest reasons why we want you on the show, is because of what you're speaking in terms of the internal work that takes, for someone to be able to do that, whether it is managing negative thoughts and things like that, and being able to work on themselves first before they can begin to even think about creating a product or service that is going to be able to contribute to the world. So that's honestly the reason why we want you on this talk, is to talk about like the first step. And ultimately, I agree with you. I mean, I have the brand called Fit to Profit for that very reason, is because my business has evolved because I had started working on myself from a physical, mental, emotional, and also spiritual level. Unless I did all of that, I wouldn't really understand why I need to do what I do now, or even continue to grow my business. So I agree 100%. I think you're preaching to the choir here. So I hope you guys who are listening really understand that everything can look really fancy and dandy from the outside with what entrepreneurship looks like. It gets messy when it has to involve you as the CEO, and know that everything evolves and everything is a work in progress. So it's encouraging in that sense. And it's okay to get messy, right? It's okay to get it wrong, because that's what it is, right? What is one key principle for you, Gregory, to share from the everyone is an entrepreneur? Because you have to have some belief that everyone is capable in some sense, right?
Well, I talk a lot about human nature, and particularly the suppression of human nature, because that's something you see when you live in certain parts of the world where people have been either legally kept from acting in certain ways, or just culturally discouraged from thinking in certain ways. That the people are frequently afraid to do anything that is even remotely different than what people around them are doing. Here in Eastern Europe, in Armenia, you see it everywhere, but it applies very much to our Americans and other Western countries. And you can't really be an innovator of any kind and not be willing to make a fool of yourself, to try something different and say, well, that didn't work. Okay, but at least now I know I tried that thing. Everyone was doing it one way, which kind of works for them, at least minimally so, but maybe there's a better way. Let me try this. That didn't work. Doesn't matter that it didn't work. Let me try something else and something else and something else. And a lot of it is just that social condemnation that people fear. If you're part of a culture where reputation is really important to you, what your neighbors think of you, what your parents will think of you, what if they think I'm a failure because I don't just have a conventional career and don't live a normal life? You really, to a large degree, have to be willing to let that go. And not completely. Don't disregard everyone's opinions completely. But don't let it be the driving force in your life. Let your passion and your ambition and your desire to change and improve things be the driving force. And as long as none of your failures are so large that you can't possibly recover from them, you can always learn something from that process, and eventually you will figure out something that works, and then hopefully you'll be able to convince the people who didn't believe in you to start adopting that better way of doing things. That's how society and culture and technology move forward, and entrepreneurs play an important part in that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, based on your experience, Gregory, can you share one in your books? What is the biggest challenge, or some of the biggest challenges do you have to overcome to achieve your level of success? Let's talk about the dirty here, like the not so pretty side of things.
Yeah, well, And a lot of it is like the really basic mindset things I was talking about there before. Some of it is being willing to take monetary risks, of course. One conversation I've had many times with the people all around me in Armenia, who generally don't make very much money compared to Westerners, I try to explain to them, do you know the reason why you're poor? And I'll use that term, but they're not in a demeaning way, like, oh, you're so poor, but just like, do you know why you make less money than many other parts of the world do? Like they're aware of this, of course. And they say, no, is it because our government is weak? Is it because we're not very well educated? No, it's none of that. In fact, they're quite intelligent people, typically. I say it's because you don't know how to think long-term about the concept of wealth creation. You don't
Mm,
know how to plan your actions or your education in such a way that you will learn things and do things that might benefit you over the course of years instead of just right away. You don't know how to spend your money on things that might produce value for you, either as a direct monetary investment or in like a tool that you might be able to use to create things that you eventually sell for money, or just reading the right book that teaches you something really, really important that you will then eventually be able to make money with. No one has ever taught you to think long-term about these things, because you've been conditioned to always think this short-term mentality. I need to feed the kids today. I need to patch the hole in the roof today. I need to take care of this immediate short-term problem right now. And boom, 80 years has gone by. You've spent your entire life doing that. And that's why you never accumulated wealth, because you never learned to think long-term and take long-term risks. Because of course, the longer time scale over which you're projecting the future outcome of your actions, the more inherent risk there is to it, because you could end up being wrong. Thinking short term, it's much easier to predict what the outcome of your actions will be. That's why people feel safe living that way, but it's also very, very constricting. And so just trying to get like that different mindset across is huge. It's pivotal. Once you start to think that way, you realize that just resolving the same daily problems over and over again is not the only possible way to live. And that's when you start to unlock the door to bigger, more leveraged actions than before. So how does that apply in your life too? Do you spend most days of your life, most hours of the day, just solving the same short-term problems over and over again? Or are you able to arrange your life in such a way that you mostly have easy fixes for those things and can now focus more on the long-term problems?
mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. So what I'm hearing is entrepreneurship or success is not an overnight, I guess, remedy. It's definitely a more of a lifelong goal.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm also hearing is, like, first of all, like you said, you have to really ensuring that you're opening yourself up to possibility and seeing different ways of seeing things. And then secondly is being okay with challenging your own beliefs and having a new set of, I want to say, beliefs per se, and going after it with alternating your, I guess, environment or habits and all of the things. Is that what I'm hearing? It's that is the really true picture to what the journey should look like, right? Because there's ways to doing some different things and making mistakes. So it's okay to make mistake, is what I'm hearing. And then secondly, really handling the limiting beliefs in the process. Am I hearing
Yes.
everything
And
correctly? Yeah.
it all comes down to essentially what your paradigm is, in a word, the way you see the world, the way you process information. If your paradigm is roughly the same as everyone around you, you will live roughly the same life as everyone around you. And that's probably not what your goal is. If you're interested in becoming independently employed, an entrepreneur, living an unconventional life, taking more control of your life, you have to stop thinking the same way everyone around you does if you're ever going to stop having the same results as everyone around you. So whether you're in a post-Soviet country where everybody has a particular paradigm about how business works here because of the history of your country, or you're back in the States or anywhere else, you're embarking on the entrepreneurial path for a reason. It's because you've recognized you want something that you cannot get just doing what you were doing before, which is probably the same thing most people around you are doing. So don't just do different actions, think differently, see the world differently. That's what will lead to different actions.
Mhm. Yeah, so you started telling us about like what you've been doing and things like that. So what was the beginning of it all? Because I feel like this is going to really tie in all of the stories of the reason why you do what you do. Why do you think, right? Like you said, if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, is you believe in something that's bigger than yourself, or that, there's a different way to doing something. So for you, what was that moment where you decided that this is my path?
Oh, that probably came when I was a teenager. I I was always a very rebellious, very incensed and ambitious, free-spirited type person. I was always the kind of person who was going to set my own goals and follow them one way or another, even if that meant being very reckless and making a lot of mistakes along the way. I still have roughly that same mentality today. I just make fewer mistakes today because I already made most of those mistakes 10 or
Yeah.
15 years ago. So so that's what success looks like. Somebody who's already made a lot of mistakes and now knows he doesn't need to make those mistakes anymore. And of course, 10 or 15 years from now, I'll be saying the same thing about my present self. Look at all the mistakes he was making back then. Thank God I don't need to make those mistakes anymore. And I became very passionate about seeing as much of the world and as much of humanity and trying to understand what makes us tick on the individual level or the macro societal level. And
Mhm.
that's why I mostly write books about the way people think now, because to me, that's the origin of everything we do, right or wrong. Everything that can be improved about the world or everything that we do well comes down to the way we think, how that changes across time and across cultures. So if I can contribute in some way to improving the way people think and therefore how they live, I find that very fulfilling.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I find it so true. For most of the successful entrepreneurs I speak to have similar stories like yours. Like they knew from a very young age that things weren't supposed to be like that, or there has to be a better way, or, being rebellious, or, deciding on their own goals and going after it. So I feel like maybe I am biased, but I feel like for those who are very entrepreneurial, have those similar traits of really, being on their own. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have a voice, etc. So I really feel that for some people who want to go after that and really truly express themselves in that way, they should definitely go for it. This show is ultimately that. It's like to keep those who have already started their businesses to stay in there, even though things can get hard. But like you said, it's a long-term goal. It's building wealth for the future, and not for just for immediate monetary benefits. So that's amazing. So tell us a little bit more about Everyone is an Entrepreneur and that book, and what people should be expecting to hear from you about in that book.
Sure. This is what it
There
looks
it
like.
is. Yeah.
Uh, I really like what I did on the back cover here. I took some old Soviet propaganda posters that kind of had ironic advice on them, considering the source they were coming from. This one in Russian says, translated, "To have more, we must produce more. To produce more, we must know more." That's good advice. That's one of the principles I talk about in the book, is that the primary source of all forms of wealth is knowledge of how the world, how reality works, and then usefully applying that knowledge in some way. But when it's ironic coming from the Soviet state, because they did so much to limit the way people thought and to give them a false knowledge about how reality worked, because it made them easier to control, right? So it was good advice, just coming from a bad source that applied it to achieve the opposite effect. So if you read this book, oh, here's one of those cats I mentioned. Hello. If you read this book, you're going to get a lot of cultural examples of how people failed to apply universal economic and entrepreneurial principles, the kind of stuff that we mostly take for granted and almost think of as common sense in the West, because it is so culturally encouraged in us that we forget not everybody gets to benefit from this automatic knowledge. Even intelligent people, even so-called educated people and skilled people, no matter how much they might know about one thing, no matter how good of a mechanic they might be, or however good they might be at anything, or how much they might know about something, there are many cultural freedoms that they don't grow up with, that prevent them from thinking entrepreneurially, from understanding the full extent of basic laws like supply and demand or arbitrage. And so that limits your options of how you can produce value and exchange value, no matter what other assets you might have to work with. If you're a great handyman, but no one ever told you how important it is for you to own the tools you use to be a handyman, then you will never get to practice your craft as a handyman. You will never get to build and sell things, or have people hire you to do jobs where you apply your craft and make money independently. And therefore, you definitely can't scale up and form any kind of entrepreneurial organization where you're making more and more money, producing more and more value in a scalable kind of way. And all of that first requires you to have certain premises in your mind of what the best way for you to apply the value of your knowledge and your skills will be. So like I give many examples in the book that I hired so many people to come work on the house I bought in a village here who showed up without tools because they expected me to have tools for them. Like just somebody who moved into an old house said, I need a lot of people to come work on this house. They've been working in these trades for decades, some of them. They never have bought their own tools because they never thought they had enough money to. They never saw it as a long-term investment. Like if I take some of the money I make from these jobs I do, and instead of just paying for food and basic necessities, if I make an invest in myself and buy power tools, maybe then I will be able to get more work and charge more for my labor and scale up over time to making more and more money and owning more and more tools and hiring more and more people, the kind of stuff we consider obvious in the West, right? There's just a natural chain of scaling from a position of low value creation to high value creation, right? Teenagers in America get this, even if they've never been explicitly educated about these things, even if they don't have an MBA or something, or they've never read Adam Smith, because it's part of our culture. We encourage our children to run lemonade stands on the sidewalk when they're 6 years old and make a quarter or $1 here or there, mow your neighbor's lawn or something. From these kinds of simple actions, we are learning the mechanics of value creation and exchange. And those kinds of things are heavily discouraged here. And so no one ever really learns to think this way. And it is probably the single most limiting thing about their economy and about their mindsets. If you could just teach them the basic principles of entrepreneurship and economics, you would revolutionize everything going on in this country, as far as I'm concerned. That would have a bigger impact than any other educational reform, political reform, or charitable initiative you could possibly try to do here. If you could just teach them these few basic universal principles, they would be more empowered throughout life. That's what this book is about. Why don't people think this way? What you as the reader can do to think better this way too, because even if you think you understand these things, there are probably blind spots in your life that prevent you from applying them to the furthest possible extent.
Yeah. And that is amazing. And again, one of the reasons why we want you to come and speak about it from a different perspective. I know the title of the show is Mama's Making Millions. I know you're a cat dad, but the reason is because you see entrepreneurship from another side. And we have so many opportunities. I feel like there's overwhelming amount of opportunities and things like that we have in the West, but most of us are not able to see it because we are not open to it. And with this book, I feel like they can really see, wow, no, I have the privilege, I have the opportunity, I could make it happen, and really to encourage them to take that next step if they haven't already. So, and with that said, I am really excited for you guys who are listening, and of course, who are also a part of our community now, that Gregory is generous enough to share this ebook with you if you were to visit his website, which is gregorydeal.net. Gregory, Gregory, deal is spelled DIEHL.net. And we'll have a link to download the book so you can really see what's truly possible for you today. And without any more questions, I know you've been so patient. If you have any parting remarks for the audience, I would really appreciate it. And thank you again for your time, your knowledge, and your contribution to the work of creating a difference in the world.
Yeah, thanks. I would just add, The title of the book is very deliberate. Everyone is an entrepreneur. Not like everyone should become an entrepreneur. Everyone should quit their job and start a business. No, everyone is by default. It's part of human nature. And by that, I mean that we make intentional choices with the intention of producing a valuable outcome. And to be entrepreneurial is just to try to scale this to the furthest possible extent. How do I produce the most value from the minimum required costs of me? Everyone in the world is doing this automatically, unconsciously, with every choice they ever make. So in that regard, everyone is an entrepreneur. And to get over the fear of that label, like can I be an entrepreneur? Can I run a startup? Can I, we build up this culture around that term and what it means. And we read these blogs written by entrepreneurs, and sometimes it's very encouraging, but sometimes it's also intimidating, because if we don't immediately identify with that person who's telling us what an entrepreneur should be, we might say, oh, I guess that's not the path for me. I'm trying to universalize the concept and open it up to everyone, saying, no, you already are one. I just want you to be better at being one. I want you to learn how to make choices that benefit you more and require less and less from you. And so over time, your standard of living raises. That's what a standard of living is, right? You get more and more as a result of less and less required from you. That's what I want everyone to start thinking of themselves as, the entrepreneur they already are, just a better version of it.
Yep. Amazing. Thank you again so much for your knowledge, time, and expertise in this. And again, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. We will see you soon, Gregory. Thank you.
Bye.